All right, I will say good morning. Let us begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning share. To thank our annual TALMUD Torah sponsor for Tafshin Pei, the Tilson Mishpach of Eretz Yisrael, for dedicating all the Shurim and Drushos as a zechus for besuros, tovos for Am Yisroel. Our TALMUD Torah sponsors for the month of Adar Haba Aleinu L'Tova, Stephen Teri Czinn, in loving memory of Teri's father, Dr. Kahn, Tzvi Hersch, Ben Yosef HaKohen, on the occasion of his 12th Yahrzeit, the Ziv, Lavine, and Behrman families in memory of Mr. Willian Ziv, Zev Shmuel Ben Yisroel, Zichron Livracha. And our Daf Yomi sponsors for today, Mel Karen Rom, leilui nishmas, Mel's grandmother, Esther Bas Ya'akov, Zichron Livracha. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the nishamas will have an aliyah, the families in the Chama, all of those who need a refuah should have one. B'karach, Hashbarach, Shemer, should bring home all of our hostages, and our holy soldiers should be successful. B'chol ma'aseh yedehim. So with that, let us begin. Today's daf is Ayin Tes 79. We are picking up Emeretz Hashem on Ayin Ches Amud Beis 78b. We left off with Rabbi Nehemiah, which is, all right, pretty far up on the daf, but all right, that's fine. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11 lines down from the top. Rabbi Nehemiah, supposed to remember again, just we're kind of starting like point in the middle of something over here, just to reorient ourselves a bit. The Gemara was talking about the concept of incarcerating someone because you don't know what to do with them. So remember again, what's the relevance of that for us? The relevance of that for us is as follows. We're dealing with a case over here where Reuven injures Shimon. And Shimon looks like he's going to die, but hasn't died yet. So we need to hold on to Reuven until we figure out what ends up happening with Shimon. So the Gemara is trying to figure out, where do you find the makar? What is the source for this concept, ultimately, again, that you could hold on to someone or incarcerate someone until you know exactly what the outcome is, what you're going to do with them. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Nehemiah, Yolef mi Megadef. So Rabbi Nehemiah learns out this concept from the Megadef. The Megadef was the blasphemer, the person who cursed HaKodesh Baruch Hu b'farhesia in public in the desert. Because again, Rabbi Nehemiah says, the Megadef is the paradigmatic example. Why? Because the whole chap with the Megadef was, no one knew what to do with him. So therefore, what did they do? They incarcerated him, they held him, and they put him in a holding cell, because kilo parash maya selo, they did not know what to do with him. So Rabbi Nehemiah says, that's the makar. Sometimes when you don't know what to do with someone, by definition, hold them, incarcerate them, until you figure it out. So the Gemara says, Rabbanan Megadef hora shah haisa. The Rabbanan say, no, you can't bring a right from the Megadef, because the Megadef was an outlier. Hora shah literally means, like a temporary allowance. But for our purposes, what it also means is, it's an outlier. It's not a paradigm, it's an outlier. Why? This is very interesting. Now remember, I'm going to both say, there were two instances of people who committed egregious acts in the desert. Okay, let me reframe that. There are multiple instances of people who committed egregious acts in the desert. There were two times where someone did something and Moshe Rabbeinu did not know what to do with the individual. One of them was the Mekoshesh. The person was Mechalel Shabbos, violated Shabbos b'far Hesia in public. And the second was the Megadef, was the person who blasphemed HaKodesh Baruch Hu. Listen to this. The Gemara says as follows: Yodei haya Moshe Rabbeinu shemekoshesh b'misa. Moshe Rabbeinu knew that the Mekoshesh, the guy who was Mechalel Shabbos, Moshe knew that he was chayiv misa. Shneimar mechaleleha mos yumas, because everyone knows that the punishment for Shabbos desecration is death. Elo lo haya yodei be'eza misa nerag. What didn't Moshe Rabbeinu know? Moshe Rabbeinu didn't know which death penalty should he get. Shneimar ki lo parash ma yaselo aval Megadef lo ne'amar bo lo ne'amar bo ela farish lam api Hashem shelo haya Moshe yodea imhu ben misa kol ikar imlav. But by the Megadef, Moshe Rabbeinu had no idea what his punishment was. It's interesting. Now Moshe Rabbeinu knew, obviously something has got to happen to this guy. He did something terribly egregious. But what is his punishment? So Moshe Rabbeinu had no idea. Therefore, they had to go ahead and incarcerate him. So according to the Rabbanon, because Moshe Rabbeinu had absolutely no idea what to do with the Megadef, he cannot serve as a source for this concept of chavshua, of incarceration. So Bishlam of the Rabbi Nehemiah Hainu Dichsei Trev Umdini. Shabbos says, here's what's interesting. So now, in going back for just a moment, we had this concept. of of umdini. Umdini means that Beis Din evaluates or evaluates. So remember again, we saw this in the Mishnah, that we'll see this in the next Mishnah as well, that halacha l'maisa, in order for someone to be liable, Beis Din has to evaluate if the injury was strong enough to cause death, if the weapon used was capable of causing death. So the Gemara says, according to Rabbi Nechemia, I understand why the Torah records two different concepts of umdini. Chad, one case is amduhu lemisa v'chaya. So one is talking about a case where Beis Din originally said, so Ruvain hit Shimon. Beis Din, right? Shimon didn't die instantaneously. So what happens? Beis Din evaluated the situation. They evaluated that Shimon is going to die. Shimon is going to die. What happened? The chaya. Mazel tov. Shimon lived. And what's the halacha in that case to both sides? The halacha is that Ruvain goes free. V'chad amdu alamisa v'hakel mimashahaya. And the other case is where Ruvain again injured Shimon. Shimon, Baruch Hashem, Shimon looked like he was going to die. Then Baruch Hashem, he has a recovery. Or I should say, a partial recovery, that in that case also Ruvain goes free. According to the Rabbanon, why do you need two of these evaluations? So one is talking about a case where literally again, Ruvain injured Shimon. Shimon was going to die. Beis Din evaluated that he was going to die. And Baruch Hashem, he recovered. And the halacha therefore is that Ruvain goes free. Bechad amdu l'chaim umeis. And one is talking about a case where Ruvain injured Shimon, and then what happened? So Beis Din said, okay, he injured him, but halacha l'maisa, he didn't injure him in a way that's threatening to his life. And then Shimon ends up dying. Even in that case, Ruvain goes free as well, right? Why does Ruvain go free as well in that case? Because halacha l'maisa, at the end of the day, Beis Din originally evaluated that Ruvain did not do something that potentially caused Shimon's death. Rabbi Nechemia would say, "Amdu l'chaim umeis lo tzarich kra." No. Halacha l'maisa in a case where Beis Din evaluated and they said Shimon's not going to die, right? And then he died. Of course, Ruvain is going to go free. Right? There's no shaila over there. Why? Shari yotza mi Beis Din zakai. Because again, once Beis Din already went ahead and said that Shimon's not going to die as a result of these injuries, Ruvain is scot-free already. Now again, he may be chayav for damages, but Allah Chalamayse he's not going to be brought back to Beis Din for any kind of din. Okay, let's say first word line. Tarabbanon. Amakes chaver v'amdu alamisa v'chaya. It's an interesting case over here. Ruvain injures Shimon, right? And what happens? Beis Din evaluated, and they said that Shimon is going to die of these injuries, or this is the type of injury that could bring about Shimon's death. And what happened? Baruch Hashem, Shimon lived. What's the halacha? Potrin also. Ultimately, Ruvain is pater. Again, we'll have to see exactly what pater means. Pater, obviously, what does pater mean? What does it mean? Pater from death penalty, right? The shaila is he going to be chayiv in damages? All right, well, we'll get to that. Amdu misa v'hakim mashahaya. But conversely, let's say again, Ruvain injured Shimon, and then what happened? Beis Din evaluated, and they said, okay, Shimon is going to die as a result of these injuries. And then what happened? V'hakim mashahaya. And then Baruch Hashem, Shimon's condition improved. What's the halacha? Omdin also omed sheni lemamon. Oh, very interesting. At that point, I will say, obviously, if Ruvain injures Shimon and Beis Din says, okay, Shimon's going to die, there's no financial judgment against Ruvain. Why not? Kimle b'drabimine. Right? You can't be chayiv both misa and mamon. You can't be chayiv a death penalty and monetary compensation. Now the second case is very interesting. So Ruvain injures Shimon. Beis Din says, okay, Shimon's going to die. So therefore, again, we're waiting for Shimon to die. Then we'll execute Ruvain. There is no monetary judgment against Ruvain. In this case over here, interestingly enough, then Baruch Hashem, Shimon has a shtek refuah shlema. He has a little bit of an improvement in his condition. In that case, the Brisa says, we bring Ruvain back to Beis Din, Omdin also, Omed Sheni, Lamaman. Okay, Baruch Hashem, now Shimon's not going to die. No problem. Baruch Hashem will bring Ruvain back to Beis Din for a second judgment to assess monetary damages. Good. So the Gemara says, "Ve'im la'achar kein hechbed umeis halach." I'm sorry. So we'll say, what happens if afterwards again? So now, this is an interesting case, right? So Reuven injures Shimon. At first glance, so Beis Din says Shimon's going to die of his injuries. So obviously we're going to wait till Shimon dies, we'll execute Reuven. Then Shimon's condition improves. So what do? We bring Reuven back to Beis Din for an Omer Sheni, a second evaluation for monetary damages. Then what happens? Shimon becomes ill again, or his condition worsens, and he dies. So what's the halacha in this case? Halach achad omed ha'imsai div Reb Nechemia. Reb Nechemia says, okay, in this case over here, we're not going to put Reuven to death because there's too much going on over here. So we'll go after the second evaluation, which is damages, and Reuven will pay those damages to Shimon's heirs. V'cham say, ein omed achar omed. Chacham say, no, we don't go ahead. We don't do valuations after valuations. That's too confusing. Tanya idach, another brayso. Amdua lemisa omdin oso lechayim. So listen to this, we'll say, if halacha l'maisa, Reuven injured Shimon, and Beis Din judged Reuven that he's going to be put to death. And then what happens? Omdin oso lechayim. If Shimon's condition improves, we'll change the evaluation. All right. L'chayim ein omdin oso lemisa. But interestingly enough, if Reuven injures Shimon and Beis Din initially says Shimon's going to live, and then Shimon's condition worsens, we do not change the evaluation. In other words, essentially what we're saying is like this. We'll change the evaluation when it benefits Reuven, which is in line with the general motif that we are reticent to put people to death. That's what's happening over here. So therefore, if Reuven injures Shimon and Beis Din says, this Shimon's going to die, and then Shimon's condition improves, we'll change the evaluation from capital to monetary. On the other hand, if Reuven injures Shimon and at first glance Beis Din says Shimon's going to survive, therefore this is a monetary case, not a capital case, and then Shimon's condition declines, we will not go ahead and switch the evaluation. What happens if we originally evaluated the situation and we said that, okay, Shimon's going to die, and then, Baruch Hashem, Shimon's condition improves, right? So I'm sorry. So we'll go ahead and do another valuation or evaluation for monetary damages. And if afterwards Shimon's condition worsened and he died, so the halacha is mishalim nezek v'tzar liyarshim. We'll go ahead and we'll make. So again, in that case, since there was already a monetary judgment against Reuven, we'll make Reuven pay the damages to the inheritors. Me'emasai mishalim. Just in general, by the way, when assessing damages, we'll say, especially in these kind of cases where there's an injury, maybe he's going to die, then he gets better. How do you evaluate damages? Misha sheiku, from the time of the injury. So we don't, it's interesting, we don't assess damages, for, let's say, from the time that Shimon's condition improves, and we switch it from a capital case to a monetary case. Rather, we assess damages from the time of the injury itself. Ustama Rabbi Nechemia. And ultimately, again, the Stam Mishnah follows Rabbi Nechemia. Okay. So the way the Rambam paskins, just in this case, because this is actually an interesting case about changing the status of valuation. So the way the Rambam paskins over here, is going to read this to you. He says, "Hamakis chavera be'evan or be'agrav Yosef and omnin oso. Imam dual lechayim nosei chamisha dvar v'niftar v'afilu chala hamuka v'hechbir meis machmas hamakahari zepater." So first the Rambam says like this: Reuven injures Shimon. If Beis Din evaluates the situation, they say, okay, you know what? Shimon's going to live. He's going to live, obviously, both say, and obviously Beis Din is consulting doctors with this also, right? They're not making their own decisions based on this. But Allah Beis Din says, Reuven's going to live. Fine. So what do? They assess damages against Reuven, and we're done. And even if the next day Shimon dies, and doctors determine Shimon died as a result of his injuries, that's it. There is no capital liability for Reuven. Once the judgment has been done, that Allah said that Reuven is chayiv financially, the case is closed, even if Shimon subsequently dies from his injuries. Good. He goes on. Now, Allah if Reuven injures Shimon and Beis Din assesses it and they say, Shimon's going to die. So what do we do? We incarcerate Reuven until Shimon dies. Im meis yihareg hamaka, ve'im hekel v'nisrap refuah shlema v'ala pashak araglav kishar b'yim mishayim makach mishdavar v'niftar. So this is interesting. In this case, so if Shimon dies, we'll put Ruvain to death. If Shimon experiences a refuah shlema, now we'll get to this. What is, actually we saw this in yesterday's daf. What is the definition of refuah shlema? Definition? That Shimon walks on his own volition outside. Right? In that case, Ruvain is totally free. It's totally free. So that's how the Rambam paskin. So again, halacha l'maisa, if Beis Din assesses that Shimon is going to survive, we make this a monetary case, assess damages against Ruvain, and Ruvain goes on his way. Even if Shimon drops dead next day, and it's clear that it's a result of his injuries, the judgment is done. If on the other hand, Beis Din evaluated that Shimon is going to die as a result of this injury, we incarcerate Ruvain until the time of death of Shimon, then we adjudicate this as a capital case. Unless, of course, Shimon has a refuah shalema. The refuah shalema is defined of walking on his own volition, of his own power, his own power outside. Then we release Ruvain. Now, let's say that Mel brought this up. You have to say the one piece. I don't know. I tried to look around for this a little bit. Is how long, does this go on for? Right. In other words, what does this mean that we like the Rambam says we incarcerate Ruvain? How long do you incarcerate him for? Until one of two things happens. Until Shimon dies or he gets better. What sounds like, interestingly enough, that if Shimon lingers as a result of his injuries, we keep Ruvain incarcerated as long as it takes to go ahead and be mavar and clarify what this is. Okay, so we'll say, so that is the halacha, ultimately, again, by Beis Din evaluations and assessments. Mishnah. This is a very interesting case. Interesting case. Ruvain intended to kill an animal, but he ended up killing a person. Okay, so again, his intent, he was going hunting, right? He was going hunting, right? And what happened, right? Is it deer season, right? We decided he's going hunting, and he ended up killing a person. Okay? Or, for that matter, again, he intended to kill an akum, but instead he killed a yid. He was going to kill a nefel. Nefel, in this context, is a non-viable child, right? And he killed a regular viable person, right? So in all of these cases, pater. We'll say in all these cases he's pater. Now why? Because remember again, in order to be chayiv for murder, there needs to be intentionality. And intentionality is defined, at least in this first piece, as you have in mind to kill someone specific. But if again, I'll say in all of these cases, Ruvain did have in mind to kill someone specific, and then that mindset did not materialize. Therefore, he's going to be pater. Next. Niskavin la kosa al masnav, avalo haya ba kedei lahamis al masnav, v'halcha la alibo, v'haisa kedei lahamisa alibo. So listen to this, I will say. Ruvain goes over to Shimon, and his intention is to hit Shimon on the leg. Right? Very hard. Now again, but that type of injury on the leg would not have caused Shimon's death. Ruvain did not aim his punch, his blow very well. So what ends up happening? He ends up hitting Shimon on the heart. And when he hits him on the heart, Shimon dies. So I will say, but the intentionality of the blow delivered, had it been delivered in the way that it was intended, would have caused injury, not death. But because the blow was not delivered in the way it was intended to be delivered, it causes death. So the Gemara says, what's the halacha? Pater. Ruvain's pater. Once again, because we see in order to be chayiv for capital cases, there has to be intentionality. And intentionality, we're going to see, really means two things. Number one, intentionality for a particular person, and intentionality to deliver the blow in a certain way. Next, Ruvain intended to hit Shimon on his heart, top of Vayin test. But the truth is, and it was a hard enough blow that would have killed Shimon. But what happened? He ends up hitting Shimon on the leg instead. And this type of blow, normally when delivered on the leg, this type of blow when delivered on the leg normally would not be a death blow. We don't have to have death blow. But what happens? Umeis. But nevertheless, Shimon died as a result of it. Pater. Because we'll say, now why is Ruvain pater in this case? Because again, what we begin to see is, in order to be chayiv in a capital case, the injury you delivered has to be one that under normal circumstances is capable of causing the death of the individual. So in this case over here, this type of blow on the leg normally would not have been able to cause death. It did. It did in this case, but therefore Reuven is going to be potter. Incredible. Niskavin lahakos al hagadol for lo haya bakadei lahamis. Right, agadol v'halcha lo ala katan v'haya bakadei lahamis es hakatan umeis potter. Suppose a similar case over here. So Allah chalamais again. You intended to hit an adult, a gadol, and this type of blow would not normally kill a gadol, but instead you ended up hitting a child. And again, this type of blow could kill a child and did kill a child. Once again, potter. Niskavin lahakos es hakatan v'haya bakadei lahamis es hakatan. Listen to this case. Reuven intended to go out and deliver a blow on a child, and this type of blow would have caused the death of the child. But what ended up happening? V'halcha la ala gadol. Reuven ends up hitting a gadol. Now, under normal circumstances, this type of blow would not kill the gadol. But in this case, umeis killed the gadol, potter. Again, Abosai, same theme over and over. So again, Abosai, so what you see over here is, it seems to be according to the Mishnah, in order to be chayiv for killing someone, what do you need? Number one, intentionality of the victim, or intentionality as to the identity of the victim. In order to be chayiv a capital case, you have to kill the person you intended to kill. That's number one. And number two, the blow, or whatever it is, the mechanism of death has to be something that is capable of truly bringing about the death of the individual. Okay. Next. Supposed to listen to this, but if Reuven was going to injure Shimon, his intention was to injure him on the leg, and this type of injury is something that would have caused the death of Shimon. And what happened? And he did it. He injured Shimon on the leg. And what happens? I'm sorry. I said that wrong. Reuven was going to injure Shimon on the leg. And the type of blow delivered would have normally brought about the death of Shimon. And what happened? But instead, Reuven delivered that same blow on the heart. And what? And halacha l'maisa again, he ends up killing Shimon. Chayiv. He's in chayiv. Why, Abosai? Why? Because it was a death blow. Since, again, had the injury been delivered in the way it was intended, it would have caused the death of Shimon. Therefore, this is called a death blow. And even though it ends up on a different part of the body, if it results in the death, Reuven is going to be chayiv. Very interesting. So same idea. Reuven intended to kill an adult, and he injured the adult, or the death blow was delivered in a way that it would have caused the death of an adult. But then he ended up going out and killing a katan, and the katan died. Chayiv. Ultimately, again, Reuven is going to be chayiv. Now this is interesting. Over here, we'll have to see exactly what this means. But again, the Gemara says chayiv. Rabbi Shimon says, "Afilu niskavin larag ezeh v'harag ezeh pater." Rabbi Shimon says, no. Even right, if you had intention to kill A, but instead you killed B, ultimately you're going to be pater. Okay, so let's analyze this. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Shimon Ahiyah. What is Rabbi Shimon going on? Is Rabbi Shimon going on the Reisha, or is he going on the Seifa? So the Gemara says, Ilema as-Seifa. If you want to say that Rabbi Shimon is going on the last case, that where Rabbi Shimon is placed in the Mishnah, the problem is, it shouldn't, right? It should say, Rabbi Shimon Poter mi Bayale. It should just say Rabbi Shimon Poter. That's it. You don't have to say Niskavin larag ezeh v'harag ezeh. Just say the Tanakama said that if halacha l'maisa you intended to hit a katan, and the death blow delivered was strong enough to kill a katan, and instead you killed the gadol. Tanakama says you're chayiv. And then if Rabbi Shimon's arguing on that, it should just say Rabbi Shimon poter. So rather what? The Gemara says Ella areisha. Rather, Rabbi Shimon is going on the reisha. What's the reisha? Well, so here we go. This is fascinating. The reisha was niskavin larag es habeima v'harag es ha'adam. Right? If Reuven had intention to kill a behemah, but instead he killed a person, la'ovei kochavim v'harag es Yisrael, or he killed an akum. And instead he killed a Jew, or the nefalim v'harag es ben kriyama. He had intention to kill a non-viable baby, and instead he killed a viable baby. In all of these cases, pater. Now, what can you infer from this? Interestingly enough, what you could infer according to the Tanakama, which is indeed what the Tanakama says later on. The only reason why you're pater in that case, according to the Tanakama, is because your action ended up resulting in the death of an entity in a different category, right? You had intention to kill a behema, you killed an adam. You had intention to kill an akum, you killed a Yehudi. You had intention to kill a nefel, you killed a ben kayama. Okay, so your intention did not materialize. But listen to this, but according to the Tanakama, if I intended to kill Ruvain, but instead I killed Shimon, I'm chayiv. Because the Tanakama says the threshold for liability is intentionality to commit an act of murder, even if I end up killing a different person, as long as that person is quote unquote in the same category as my intended victim, I'm chayiv. And now comes along Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon says, no, you're not. Rabbi Shimon says, I feel in this kavin lara gezeh bahara gezeh pater. Rabbi Shimon says, no, that is not true. That is not true. In order to be chayiv for murder, two things have to occur. Number one, you have to deliver a blow that is capable of causing death, and your intended victim must be killed. But if you end up killing the wrong person, you cannot be tried for a capital crime. Now again, there's still other forms of liability, but lamaisa you can't be chayiv for murder. So also, I just want to point out, this is just so you understand, this is a raging machlokes. You understand what's happening over here. According to Tanakama, as long as you end up killing someone in the same category, you're going to be chayiv. Okay, if it's different categories, Adam behema, Akum Yehudi, Katan Gadol, Nefel ben or not even Katan Gadol, Nefel ben Kayama, two different categories. Okay, you're not going to be chayiv. But within the same category, even though again you ended up killing the wrong person, you're going to be chayiv. Rabbi Shimon says, no, that's not the way it works. In halacha, you're only chayiv for a premeditated act of murder with a death blow that is capable of causing death, and with the victim you intended to kill. Incredible, raging machlokes. So pshita, so Gemara says it's obvious. Koi Ruvain v'Shimon. Listen to this. If Ruvain and Shimon are standing together, va'amar Arna Ruvain kamechavna, the Shimon lo kamechavna, and what happens? And let's say again, Ruvain and Shimon are standing together. And we'll call him Ploni, right? The murderer. Murderer comes along and says, "Listen, guys, I'm going to kill one of you. I actually differently. I'm going to kill Ruvain. And by the way, I only have kavana for Ruvain. Hineni muchan muzuman, right? La'avar avera shekasa b'TORAH shal shvichos damim, right? And I only have in mind to kill Ruvain. It's my kavana to kill Ruvain. And what happens? He ends up killing Shimon. And he'll pluktayu. So we'll say, okay, so that's the machlokes Tanakama and Rabbi Shimon. According to the Tanakama, you'll be chayiv. According to Rabbi Shimon, you're not chayiv. The Gemara says, listen to this. Amar lachad me'inayu mai. This is wild. So what happens? What happens if Ploni, the killer, says, Ruvain Shimon, guys, listen, today on my to-do list is to kill someone, right? I wasn't really specific as to who I'm going to kill, right? So it's going to be either one of you, and he ends up killing one of them. What is the halacha in that case? In other words, we'll say, what would happen over here where, let's say, again, the murderer lacked specific intent for an intended victim? What would happen there? Inami, kasava Ruvain, v'nimtza Shimon. The other possibility is what happens if the killer intended to kill, we'll call it the person on the left, because ultimately, again, he thought it was Ruvain, but it turned out to be Shimon. So interestingly enough, in that case, he had kavana for that guf, for that body, but it turned out to be the wrong person. So what's the halacha? So Tashman says, Rabbi Shimon Omer, Ad Shomer LaPlonian Miskavein. Rabbi Shimon says, ultimately one is only liable for death until literally the killer says, I have kavana to kill this particular person. My time is Rabbi Shimon. So we'll say, so again, it turns out that according to Rabbi Shimon, the only time you're going to be liable is when you have specific intent for a particular person, and that specific intent materializes. That's when you will be chayiv. So we'll say, by the way, my time is Rabbi Shimon. What's Rabbi Shimon's logic? So the Gemara says, Omer Kra, the pasuk says, Va'arav lo v'kamalav. The pasuk says literally again that he will lie in wait for him, Va'arav lo, right? Ultimately, like he plans, he schemes for him, v'kamalav, and then he rises up against him. So the Gemara says, Ad she is kavein lo. Ultimately, again, until he goes ahead and has kavana for him. So Rabbi Shimon says, essentially, the pasuk says that Allah l'maisa, you're only going to be chayiv in a capital case until you have specific intent for the victim, and that specific intent materializes in exact accordance with, I should say, your actions materialize in exact accordance with your intent. So we'll say, by the way, if the Rabbanan say that pasuk of va'arav lo v'kama love, which will say that pasuk really seems to like scream intentionality, that you're only going to be chayiv. Excuse me, if you intentionally go ahead and murder someone, which again, you have specific kavanah for someone, and that kavanah materializes, so what did the Rabbanan use it for? The Rabbanan used that for a different case. Listen to this. Prat, lezorik even lago. That comes to exclude a case where I will say, I come along, and there's a group of people standing, I throw a stone into a group of people, and the stone kills someone. So the pasuk teaches me I'm not chayiv for that. Now again, when I say I'm not chayiv, in other words, I'm not chayiv death. I have a death penalty for that. So Gemara says, by the way, what's that case? But that happens to say, by the way, just like on a moral, ethical level, it's an interesting case, right? I take a stone, I throw it into a group of people, the stone falls on someone and kills them. The Rabbanan will say, I'm not chayiv for killing someone. What? Now the Gemara says, by the way, what's the case? Hechi dami. So if you're talking about a case of 9 kusim, and 1 yid, so okay, that makes sense. Why? Because again, there was a rove of kusim, and therefore one would not be chayiv in a capital way for the death of a kusi. Inami palgu safek nefashos lahakel. Even if it's half and half, ultimately again, it's a suffix about whether or not there's capital liability, and therefore again, I'll be patur. Lo tzricha deika tisha Yisrael v'kusi echa b'nein. Wow, what's the case? The case ultimately, again, is where there were 9 Yisraelim, right? 9 Yidden, and 1 Kusi. But nevertheless, I'm Potter. What's the pshat? Davile Kusi Kavua. Now, we'll say again, because since the presence of the Kusi is established, therefore, Allah Chalamai says Kavua, right? He's established. And we have a principle, Kol Kavua, Kamechza Mechzadami. So we'll say again, this is the famous case of you find a piece of meat, right? And there are nine non-kosher stores and 1 kosher, or the reverse case as well. So what's the status of the piece of meat? It depends where you find it. You find it in the public, you find it in the store. We have a concept. Kol kavua, anything that is established within a group, essentially switches the group dynamics and makes it 50-50. So even in a case where you have 9 Jews and 1 kusi, since that kusi is established in the group, it's considered to be like half and half. And now, halach l'maisa, nevertheless, if I throw a stone into that group, and the stone kills someone, I am not liable for that. So we'll say, so again, so therefore, what we have over here is just to point out, we are left with this raging debate. I will say, I cannot really even underestimate the raging kite or the ragingness of this debate. Right? So again, I will say, literally again, I have in mind to kill Ruvain, and I end up killing Shimon. What's my liability? According to the Rabbanan, I'm chayiv. Why? Because I had in mind to commit an act of murder, and I ended up murdering someone who is in the quote-unquote same category as my intended victim. Therefore, I'm chayiv. According to Rabbi Shimon, I'm patur. I'm patur from death penalty. Chayiv in a lot of other bad stuff in life, but again, patur from the death penalty. Why? Because according to Rabbi Shimon, in order to be chayiv for a death penalty, number one, there has to be a premeditated act, a desire to kill someone, and my intentions must materialize upon the intended victim. Incredible. So let's analyze more. So Bishlama, L'Rabbanan, that means Kavin Arag is chayiv. So according to Rabbanan, who say that if I have in mind to kill Reuven and I end up killing Shimon, I'm chayiv. D'chsiv v'chi yinatzu anashim v'nagfu ishahara. So the pasuk says, well, say Torah talks about the idea that if men are fighting and they end up going ahead and shoving a pregnant woman and she ends up miscarrying. V'amar Belazar b'mitzah sheva mitzah kasam medaber. So I was talking about, again, where the men are fighting and they end up causing the death of a third person, right? So Reuven's fighting with Shimon. His intention is to kill Shimon, but he ends up killing someone else. So therefore the Torah says, D'chsev imason yihiyah v'nasata nefesh tachas nefesh. And the pasuk says, Reuven's fighting with Shimon, and Reuven ends up killing someone else. Torah says, v'nasata nefesh tachas nefesh. Reuven is liable in a capital sense, which means that even though Reuven had in mind to kill A, but he ends up killing B, he's going to be liable. El Reb Shimon, hay v'nasata nefesh tachas nefesh my avedle. What does Rabbi Shimon do with that pasuk of v'nasata nefesh tachas nefesh? To which the Gemara says, mammon. Rabbi Shimon understands it doesn't mean capital case. Rather, what does it mean? It means monetary compensation. But according to Rabbi Shimon, if Reuven's fighting with Shimon with the intention potentially to kill Shimon, and he ends up killing someone else, there's not capital liability, but rather what is there? Financial liability. Uchid Rabbi Disanya, Rabbi Omer v'nasata nefesh tachas nefesh mamon. Rabbi says in this case, Rabbi say over here, where the Torah says v'nasata nefesh tachas nefesh, which is talking about the case of where Reuven is fighting with Shimon, right? Reuven ends up falling onto or hitting a pregnant woman. She ends up miscarrying. So the pasuk says v'nasata nefesh tachas nefesh. She will give one life for another life. Rabbi says that refers to monetary compensation for the loss of the pregnancy. So the Gemara says, listen to this. Nefesh mamish, you say means money. Maybe it literally means a life for a life. Ne'emra nesina lamata, v'ne'emra nesina v'osei amaveis lemala. It says nesina above and it says nesina below. Ma lahalon mamon, afkan mamon. So we'll say both contexts, it means monetary compensation. Good. Amar Rava. So Rava says, Hay d'tana de bechizkiya, mafka midibei Rabbi midrebi umafka midrabanan. Okay, so we'll say, so just so you know, so first of all, we have our machlokes, Rabbi Shimon and the Tanna Kama. Right? So that is still sitting here about, again, I have intention to kill Reuven, I end up killing Shimon. Is there liability? Tanna Kama says yes, Rabbi Shimon says no. So just hold on to that. Just hold on to that. Now Rabbi say the Gemara brought up that machlokes, by the way, is really also embedded in how you go ahead and interpret that pasuk, where two people are fighting, they end up bumping into a pregnant woman and she ends up miscarrying. So the pasuk says, "V'nasata nefesh tachas nefesh." The Rabbanan understand that means capital liability. Rabbi Shimon, based on Rabbi, says that means financial liability. Now the Gemara says, by the way, there's another opinion. Rava says another opinion. Hay d'tana de bechizkiya. Mafka midrabi, mafka midrabanan. This opinion of the Bechizkiya is not like Rabbi, not like the Rabbanon. How so? Take a look at Rashi. Rashi is in the second line from the top. V'hadatan Bechizkiya mafka midrabi midrabanan. Drabanan mechayiv le misa, l'niskavi lara gezeh v'hara gezeh. V'Rabbi mechayiv le mammon. V'ilutana de Bechizkiya lo mechayiv mammon lo misa. This is fascinating. So watch this. So there's essentially going to be three shitas, right? So when I intend to kill Reuven, but I end up killing Shimon, what's the halacha? So according to the Rabbanon, I'm chayiv misa. Okay? According to Rabbi, which is also the view of Rabbi Shimon, I'm not chayiv misa, but I am chayiv what? Mammon, monetary compensation. Now there's a third opinion, the Bechizkiya. When I have in mind to kill Reuven and I end up killing Shimon, I'm not chayiv misa, nor am I chayiv mammon. I'm not chayiv anything. I'm not chayiv anything. That's right. So third opinion over here, not going to be chayiv anything. So the Gemara says, now where does that come from? Listen to this. Tana de Bechizkiya. This is fascinating. Maki ado maki behema. So we'll say, right? Torah speaks about again one who kills an animal, one who goes ahead and kills a person. The pasuk says, maki behema yishamena umaki adam yumas. So this is very interesting. The Torah equates killing not equates, but juxtaposes the death of an animal, or the killing of an animal, the murder of an animal, the murder of a person. And the Torah says, if I kill an animal, yishalmena, I have to pay. And if I kill a person, you must, I'm put to death. Okay, so watch this. Ma make behema lo chalakta bein shogeg lemezid bein miskavein l'shedim miskavein. So we'll say, when it comes to killing an animal, the halacha makes no distinction to whether or not what? I'm a shogeg or a mezid. Also makes no distinction. Whether I have kavana, don't have kavana. Makes no difference if I kill it. Most of these are like makis sugis over here. Whether I kill the animal going up or coming down. And in all cases, lepotra lemamon, elechayva mamon. We'll say, if I kill an animal, makes no difference. Shogeg mezid, aliyah makes no difference. What's the halacha? What's the halacha? I'm chayiv monetary compensation to the owner of the animal. Watch this. We'll say, what the Bechizkiya is focusing on over here is this juxtaposition of the death of an animal to a death of a person, to show that just like when it comes to the death of an animal, it doesn't make a difference how I kill the animal. What's the halacha? What's the halacha? I'm liable. Af make adam. So too, when I go ahead and I kill a person, af make adam, lo tachlok bein shogeg lemezid, there is no distinction about say whether I kill someone b'shogeg or I kill someone. Now let's do it in sentence. Or I kill b'mezid, right? Shogeg or mezid. Intentionality, lack of intentionality. Derech irida, derech aliyah. Whether I kill a person going up or coming down. L'chayva mamon el lepotra mamon. See what say in all cases of murder. Now the variable is sometimes you're chayiv death for killing someone, you're not. But one thing is clear, which is in all cases of murder, I'm never chayiv mamon. So this is the Bechizkiya Shita, that anytime you kill a person, you are never chayiv financially. Now, whether or not you're liable to be put to death, that's going to depend on how the murder occurred. But one thing is clear, which is you're never chayiv mamon, and that's the juxtaposition. When you kill an animal, it doesn't matter how you kill the animal. One thing is clear, which is what? You're chayiv mamon. When you kill a person, one thing is clear, you're never chayiv mamon. Whether you're chayiv misa or not is a different discussion, but never chayiv mamon. So the Gemara says, "Umay shem miskavin." Now, what does it mean that you don't have kavana? Ilay mashem miskavin klal hainu shogeg. So when we say, we'll say, what does it mean in a case where it says I'm not miskavin? If not miskavin it means I didn't have kavana to kill someone at all. That's called shogeg. Ela pshita shein miskavin lazeh ela lazeh. Rather, both say, shogeg means I killed someone accidentally. Einu miskavin means I had intention to kill Ruvain, and I ended up killing Shimon. V'katani l'chayv mamon el lepochro mamon. But I both say, what do you see from? But yet, nevertheless, in that case, I'm not chayiv mamon. V'i bar katalahu my itzrich lemifte mamon. But a second. Obviously, if I'm chayiv a death penalty, then of course there's no need to exempt me from monetary compensation. Why? Why? Ella lav shmamina lav bar ketalahu v'lav bar mamonuhu. Rather, I will say, what do you see from here? That there is a case where I'm not liable to a death penalty, but I'm also not chayiv for mammon. What's that case? That case is where I have intention to kill Ruvain, I end up killing Shimon. So I'm not chayiv for Misa. Why? Because again, I didn't kill my intended victim, but I'm also not going to be chayiv for mammon. So therefore, I will say, this might be the most exciting thing that has happened today so far. I will say, I just want to point out something amazing. So what we have over here are three different opinions. This is good for a chazar. Three different opinions. Opinion number one, D'Rabbanan, Tanakama. Tanakama says, I have intention to kill Ruvain, right? Tinini muchal muzuma, larog is Ruvain, and I end up killing Shimon. What does Tanakama say? Tanakama, I'm liable. Chayiv Misa. Why? Because ultimately, again, at the end of the day, you had intention to kill someone, and your intention materialized upon someone in the same category. As long as you're in the same category, you're good. In other words, obviously, you have intention to kill an akum, and you kill a Yehudi, you're not going to be chayiv. You have intention to kill a behema, you go out and you kill an adam, you're not going to be chayiv. Neifel bar kayam, okay, but assuming your intention materializes in the same category, halacha l'maisa, you are chayiv misa. Rabbi Shimon, I have intention to kill Ruvain. I ended up killing Shimon. What's the halacha? Potter. Now what it sounds like is potter, but chayiv for monetary compensation, like Rebbe. Then third category, Tana de Bechizkiya, you have intention to kill Ruvain, I end up killing Shimon. What's the halacha? Potter legamrei, not chayiv misa and not chayiv mammon. How do we paskin? The suspense is killing me. Right? How do we paskin? So I'll say, listen to this. Maybe that was the wrong expression. Right? But you understand. I'll say, listen to this. Rambam, Hilchos Rotzeach, Perek Dalet Halacha Aleph. Here it is. Hamiskavin Laro Gezeh V'Hara Gezeh. I have intention to kill Ruvain, and I end up killing Shimon. Pater mimisas bezdin, umina tashlumin, umina galos. Paz like the Bechizkiya. Pater from everything. Now, again, I will say, I just want to be clear, it's bad, right? It's bad. And obviously, in Klapi Shmaya, in the eyes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there's also going to be some level of liability. But halacha l'maisa, again, I have intention to kill Ruvain, I end up killing Shimon, I'm not chayiv death, right? No death penalty, not chayiv tashlumin, and not even chayiv galus. Now, what's galus? I will say, what's galus? Remember, I can't wait to get to Maseches Makos, it's so exciting, right? But l'maisa, again, when does galus come about? Shogeg. So, right, you can't call it a shogeg. Because halacha l'maisa, again, it wasn't accidental. There was intentionality over here, right? Not chayiv tashlum, because as the Bechizkiya said, apparently in any case where there's bloodshed, there's not monetary compensation, and also again, not chayiv because I lack intentionality. It's incredible. He goes on. Lefichach. Now, by the way, the way the Rambam illustrates this is lefichach hazorich even lesoch edam Yisroel harag echamei and patim yisas bezin. So the Rambam illustrates this in an interesting way. I throw a stone into a group of Jews. Right? So we'll say, and now again, I know that when you throw a stone into a group of people, it's definitely possible it's going to cause death. And in fact, it causes the death of someone. I'm potter. That's how he passed on Rabbi really like Reb Shimon, but as modified by Tana de Bechizkiya. So therefore, Rabbi again, you intend to kill A, you end up killing B, even if they're in the same category. Pater from Isa, pater from Tashlumin, pater from Galas. Absolutely incredible. Riveting. All right, Rabbi Mishnah, let's go. We're catching up with the rest of the Daf Yomi world. Emir Hashem. Rotzech is Ari Ba'achirim. This is an interesting case. A murderer gets mixed up with other murderers. So we'll say, which by the way, it happens, right? Sometimes based on the decisions you make, really dictates the chevra that you hang with, right? It's just like the chevra that you associate with makes you the kind of person that you are. Sometimes the person you choose to become also dictates the chevra that you end up gravitating towards. Sorotzeach shenis arev ba'achirim. How does that even happen, right? A murderer gets mixed up with other murderers. So what's the halacha? So we'll have to say, well, in all reality, so besides the Musar Haskell with it, that ultimately your actions will dictate you, right? Your peer group influences your actions, and your actions often dictate your peer group. So a murderer gets mixed up with other murderers. So what's the halacha? Kulan p'turin. I'm sorry. Now, really the case over is achira means other people. So in other words, Reuven killed someone, but Reuven gets mixed up with other people. We'll have to see the exact mitzias of this in the Mishnah, but it sounds like we don't know which one Reuven is. Kulan p'turin. Everybody is pater. Okay, we'll see the exact dynamics of that case. Rabbi Yehuda says, no. Konsin osa l'kipa. We put them all literally again in a jail cell. Now, the Mishnah doesn't spell out the rest, but the rest is we go out and we feed them barley until their stomachs explode. Okay. Certainly needs a smidge of clarification on that. All right, so we'll see. Now we'll say, let's say again in general, you have a group of people who are all condemned to death. But different deaths, different misos based in. And now, because they all got mixed up, we don't know who is subject to which penalty. And as one can imagine, no one's saying, I'm the skila guy, me, give me skila, right? The guy says, give me sreifa. So no one's coming forward and volunteering the information. So all we know is we have a group of people who are all subject to a death penalty. We don't know which death penalty. So what's the halacha? Nidonin bakala. We administer the most lenient death penalty to all of them. Said the halacha is we're going to see you cannot give someone a more stringent death penalty than the one they are obligated to. So therefore, by definition, if we're not sure which death penalty, we give them the more kal one. Now, of course, there's going to be a little, as we know, there's a machlokes as to in misos based in which is considered to be more kal and what's more chamer. So, for example, haniskalim and israfin. Let's say you have a chevra. Some of the chevra is chayiv skila, some of the chevra is chayiv shreifa. You don't know who's who. So what do? Rabbi Shimon Omer and you don't know beskila. Rabbi Shimon says we give them all skila, right? Why? Shas sreifa chamura. Because everyone knows sreifa is more chamer than skila. The Chum disagree. They say no, nidona b'sreifa. Just the opposite. We give them sreifa. Why? Shas skila chamura. Because everyone knows that skila is more chamer than sreifa. Rabbi Shimon says, it's not true Zinsa. It's not true Sreifa is clearly more chamer. How do you know that? Because if Sreifa wasn't more chamer, then a bas kohen who committed adultery wouldn't be singled out for Sreifa. It's not true. Skila is more chamer. How do you know? Because the blasphemer and the person who worships idolatry gets skila. The Gemara says, what happens if you have a chevra? Some of them are subject to hereg, which is beheading, right? Saif, and others are strangulation, nechnakin. Which one gets which is the more kal? Rabbi Shimon says saif. Beheading is the more lenient form of death penalty. And the Chacham say ultimately it's chenek. So both say, interestingly enough, everyone agrees on the principle. What's the principle? That if you have a group of people on death row who get mixed up with each other, and we're not sure who's getting which death penalty. Then what's the halacha? You could only administer the most lenient of death penalties. What's the problem? Clearly there's a machlokes, again, in two categories. Between skila and sreifa, which is kal, which is chamar, and between chenek and hereg, which is kal and which is machar. Bosai, shkoyach. Incredible. We'll stop here for today. We are all caught up. Tremendous daf. Shkoyach, everyone. Great job.